What is energy independence? That term gets thrown around a lot by politicians these days, especially Republican politicians.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to address President Biden's attack on American energy independence.
Well, on a most basic level, energy independence means that a country produces more energy than it consumes, and therefore, it doesn't have to import energy from foreign entities. So, that comes down to the question, how is the USA doing in terms of energy independence? If you were to pull an average person from the street and ask them, is the US energy independent? I'm sure half of them would say, I don't know. But the ones that did have an answer would probably say, hell no. I mean, just look at gas prices these days. I live in California and I'm paying like $4.80 per gallon. It's killer out here. But if you look at the actual definition of energy independence, the USA is technically independent fully. We do produce more oil, coal, and natural gas than we import. And we don't really import for the sake of powering our cities, we import for other purposes. And so, how is this working? How is it that we produce so much oil to the point where we don't even need to import it, and yet our gas prices are still skyrocketing forevermore? Well, I have here an article from Forbes that kind of gets into it a bit. This article is essentially serving as a defense of the Biden administration. It's very resist-lib in its wording, kind of citing the fact that Republicans are criticizing Biden for not having energy independence, even though just a couple years ago they were touting Trump as being the king of energy independence, even though nothing has really changed in between either of their administrations on this front. In fact, Biden has only increased the amount of energy independence we have. But the important part of this article is this section here, and it states that because the US isn't a self-contained, isolated energy market, we are impacted by geopolitical events that affect energy flows. Shortages in the global market impact domestic prices, because we import and export oil and finished products. Thus, energy independence and energy prices are two independent factors. Now, that is true if you're going off of the most basic, bare-bones definition of energy independence. But I think that this shows the fundamental flaw with how we view energy independence in this country. If you really think about it, fossil fuels, and especially oil, will never allow us to be energy independent in a way that actually benefits your average American. No matter how much gas we produce, our gas prices are still skyrocketing. And so the only way to achieve true energy independence, which would mean independence for both the raw materials to produce energy and the price of said energy for the consumer, is through green energy and nuclear energy. And I'm going to prove that to you by using a real-world example taking place in the current day. If you've been living under a rock for 2 years, if you've been living under a mountain for the past 2 years, I'll give you a quick rundown of what's going on. So Russia invaded Ukraine, and in retaliation, the West imposed harsh economic sanctions on Russia, and this includes an oil boycott from the US and its allies. So the European Union, the US and Australia and Japan will no longer be buying Russian-produced oil. And so we've been led to believe that because of the lack of Russian oil in the market, the global price of oil has shot up. And in light of the oil price crisis, the Biden administration has been ramping up US oil production through shale oil and fracking. And he's actually approved more oil drilling projects than even former President Donald Trump. And this includes the Willow Project, which is one of the largest oil projects in US federal lands in history. And this is all being done for the sake of achieving energy independence in the wake of this war. But I'm here to tell you that this is stupid and is big dumb. So, why, you may be asking? What do you know that the president doesn't know, you filthy leftist? That's probably what you're asking. So, first of all, the idea of even ramping up investment into fossil fuels in the year of 2023 is completely ridiculous. This isn't 1990. We have viable, cheap, and environmentally friendly alternatives sitting right in front of our faces, for crying out loud. I mean, why invest into a resource that's on the downswing when we could be dominating the market for green energy? And this isn't even to mention the fact that Biden purports himself to be a so-called champion for the environment. But secondly, the idea that all of the rise in gas prices is due to the war in Ukraine is just factually incorrect. There's another major player that's had a huge hand in the oil price, and that is Saudi Arabia. Seeing an opportunity for maximum profits, Saudi Arabia has been actively colluding with Putin's Russia to decrease their supply of oil, and they're doing this to drive up oil prices for themselves. Yeah, just in case you didn't get it, that's our own ally, partnering with our biggest enemy to screw us over. And Joe Biden even directly pleaded with the Saudi king to increase his oil production. Pretty please, give us more oil, pretty please. And the Saudi king told us to fuck off. He declined Joe Biden's offer, or his request. And from a business standpoint, I guess that's fair enough for Saudi Arabia. But this just goes to show that in reality, no matter how much oil and gas we produce on our own soil, we won't be able to actually meaningfully reduce gas and energy prices for our own citizens. And especially if Saudi Arabia and Russia keep cooperating in this fashion, they will always have a much bigger impact on global oil prices than we could ever have. The US would have to make as much oil as Saudi Arabia and Russia combined to change that fact. And that's just physically impossible, because the oil's just not there. Well, the US has a lot of oil, but compared to the combined reserves of Saudi Arabia and Russia, not even close. And all of this, again, is outside of the fact that oil drilling, and especially fracking, are terrible for the environment. And I'm not just talking about vague concerns about global warming and emissions. Fracking is just a downright public health and safety concern. And more than 17.6 million people in the US now live within a mile of a fracked oil or gas well. And fracking leaches toxic chemicals into the soil, potentially contaminating sources of drinking water. And this can lead to a variety of terrible health outcomes like leukemia, early death in senior citizens, and other understudied effects. And most insanely of all, oil and gas processes have been known to cause earthquakes where there weren't earthquakes before. Beginning in 2009, Oklahoma, yeah that's right, the middle of the Midwest, Oklahoma experienced a surge in seismicity that was so large, its rate of magnitude 3 or larger earthquakes exceeded California's from 2014 to 2017. That's not supposed to happen. And so this wasn't due to fracking, but the majority of these earthquakes were caused by the industrial practice known as wastewater disposal. And that's a separate process from fracking in which fluid waste from oil and gas production is injected deep underground, far below groundwater or drinking water. And so, all in all, ramping up oil and gas production on our own soil is just generally bad for everyone. Except the oil and gas companies, of course. They're popping off, baby. Woo. And so if we actually want to achieve energy independence, the only way is through green energy. Green energy is the future, baby. Wind, solar, and hydro, and nuclear energy are all local-based forms of energy that use whatever municipality's geography and resources to control what kind of energy they have. A US powered by green energy would have a much more decentralized grid, where each municipality has its own supply, demand, and pricings. You know, in the desert you have solar, if you're by a big river, you might have a hydro plant. You know, if you have large windy plains, you're gonna have wind. And so that allows you to be able to most effectively bring energy for the demand of your constituent in your local area. And if you added on top of all of this a US full of electric and hybrid cars, then the consumer isn't gonna have to be dependent on directly purchasing a globally scarce resource just so they can get to work. I mean, how have we even allowed ourselves to get to this point? Or if I want to go get some coffee, I have to buy oil that's potentially sourced from like Saudi Arabia. And I mean, in current day, your average house with solar panels doesn't even have to pay their electric bill ever. Now that's what I call energy independence. You kidding me? If I lived in a house, I would get solar panels day one. Now, obviously there would still be a global market for solar panels. You know, there would be some countries that supply solar panels and some that import them, some that supply the raw materials and some that import those raw materials. But there would be nowhere near the same mechanism for one or two countries to directly control the global price of solar panels, because any country can easily just manufacture its own solar panels and windmills. They really try hard enough. But even with all of these market forces at play, if we have multiple forms of energy in combination, you know, green energy and nuclear energy, and still even a bit of oil and gas, I'll allow it. I know, you love chuggling your gasoline, so I'll allow just a little bit, maybe like 5%. But if we have all these in combination, that's how we get energy independence. None of this fracking and oil drilling is gonna get us there. So, if you liked that video, you can like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know if you want me to talk more about climate change on this godforsaken channel. Peace out, y'all.